but great to be with you. My name is Pat, Pat Allerton, and I'm a vicar, Church of England vicar, based in Notting Hill, a church called St. Peter's, Notting Hill. And I want to talk to you today under the heading of a title of Where the Lost Sheep Hang Out, and really just came up with that title as a bit of a hook to intrigue you all as to what that is. But I mean, I used it because at the end of the day, that's what we're about as the church, isn't it? That's what we're called to as church leaders or just Christians, those who love and follow Jesus. We are called to go out and spread the good news, to share the gospel with the whole world. Jesus' great commission to his disciples: go and make disciples of all nations. Now, a little bit about myself. I don't come from a Christian home, a Christian background. None of my family are believers. So my heart, my passion after coming to faith powerfully aged 18 and realizing Jesus is real, he's alive, my passion was always, how can I help my family come to the same faith? You know, what do we need to do to help them believe the good news? How can we make a splash in the world today? And that's really, you know, if you cut me, you know, it's a good expression, good thing to ask yourself, you know, if someone was to cut you, what would you bleed? And if you cut me, I bleed evangelism. I bleed wanting to see people to come, wanting to see them come to faith. But if you're anything like me, and I think we all have it, we all share it, there can be a deep frustration with the lack of impact, the lack of inroads that we as the church make into the world today. I mean, we feel it, don't we? We feel sidelined. We feel like we are increasingly irrelevant. There is a secular agenda at work in society today. And for years, you know, my whole Christian life, but especially the last 5-10 years, I've just had a passion in me, a desire to make some noise, to make a splash, to do anything we can to say, look, the church is here, the church is still alive. And the church is still alive because Jesus is alive. And so something I've been about the last year that we're going to be watching a video about shortly is my work this last year as the portable priest. I got nicknamed the portable priest. So there's going to be a video explaining what I've been about doing that. But in a nutshell, it was an idea I felt the Lord give me at the start of lockdown 2020, back in March, when we realized we weren't going to be able to meet in church. Churches would be locked. People couldn't go to church. And I was outside my locked church in Notting Hill. And the idea simply came into my head, and it felt like one of my thoughts, as natural as one of my thoughts. It wasn't a bolt of lightning. You know, the clouds didn't part. It's quite a sunny day, actually. But just the idea came into my head. What if, you know, I headed into the streets of my parish with a loudspeaker and just played a beautiful hymn and led people in the Lord's Prayer? You know, how offensive would that be? Surely people wouldn't get that annoyed with it, and it might lift spirits, and it would be a public witness of the church, a great opportunity to actually be more visible than we normally are, locked away in the four walls of our church, you know, these funny pointy buildings where no one generally outside of the church community, and no one outside of the believers, tends to go. So I thought, well, what if I head onto the streets? So I did that. But just a word of background, I went and did that, and the media got hold of this story. Something, you know, beyond my power, beyond my anticipation happened, that the national media got hold of this story. They didn't have a lot else to write about at the time. They wanted good news stories. It was all pretty depressing, if you remember it. And this thing sort of caught a wave, and it got a momentum where everyone wanted to hear, like, what's this funny vicar, priest guy, the portable, you know, at first I was the Portobello priest because the Portobello Road runs through my parish. So on Instagram, I set up a handle called the Portobello priest. So people outside the church, again, wanting to make an impact and a splash to the wider world, so they could sort of eavesdrop and spy on the work of the church, and maybe listen in on the whispers that we're saying, the claims we're making about our faith, without needing to cross over the threshold of the building. So on Instagram, I was the Portobello priest. I had like 200 followers. I barely used it. I've not been big on Instagram. But as this media story picked up of this priest who was going around on a tricycle, as I got, made to go on a tricycle as my daily exercise, which made a lot of sense as I couldn't drive around. And as I was cycling all over London, and in the end I went 64 times, just the story grew and the media interest increased. And so too, I guess, some presence on social media increased, because people would take videos and they'd be bored and they'd be like, oh, look, there's something weird happening outside my house. There's some guy with a loudspeaker playing Amazing Grace and leading a prayer. I mean, that's quite nice. Let's put it on social media. So everything actually that I long for as a believer and as a Christian leader began happening. And it wasn't something I sought or necessarily anticipated. I mean, I thought that it might be of interest to some people, probably in the Christian world, did not anticipate it being of such interest to the secular world, getting out onto people's radars out there, my family, non-believing people, taking an interest and finding a bit of hope through it. But just by way of introduction, I want to just state that, again, this doesn't come from nowhere. This comes from, I guess, my DNA, what God's put in me. And we each have our unique giftings, our unique shapes that God has made us in, and what he calls us to. And in the past, this isn't the first thing I've done. The first thing I felt called by the Lord to do in the public sphere, the public space. Some years ago, when the world was on the streets protesting, you remember the Arab Spring, they were all over, the streets of Egypt and in the Middle East. And there were massive uprisings. There were student riots. There were protests on the street of Britain. Winston Churchill got his head spray painted green, if you remember that. And it was like, what is going on? And it was chaos. And the tsunami happened in Japan at that time. And it felt like, Lord, are you coming soon? It feels like the end of the world. But I was just praying for student ministry at the time. I was at Holy Trinity Brompton, helping run the student work there. And we were having a time of prayer for students and ministry. And I had a picture in my mind's eye of people gathered on Parliament Square holding candles and praying for the government. And I just put this vision out, helped craft, talking to friends and other people in student ministry, like, I feel called to maybe call for a time of prayer on Parliament Square. Would your students be interested? Would you guys come along? And everyone was like, yes, definitely. We feel that's right. That feels like it's of the Lord. So shaped a vision, put some words together, made a Facebook event. And this thing sort of back then, and this is back in 2010, 11, it sort of, in the Christian sense, went viral, which is, of course, not properly going viral, but you know what I mean, Christian viral. Everyone's sharing it with their Christian mates. But thousands got invited. About 25,000 people got invited to this event happening a month after I posted it. In the end, we saw 1,000, 1,500 people turn up on Parliament Square with glow sticks, with lanterns, with candles, peacefully, just to come and pray for the government rather than just protesting, and to say we need God's help, and also to be a visible witness that the church is alive. So we called it 7:14 prayer after 2 Chronicles 7:14. And since then, we've had a number of other events happening. We did it some months later, joining 55 cities around the world to join simultaneously for an hour of prayer for their nations and leaders and communities. And saw 55 cities join in, about 10,000 people taking part, but doing it publicly. My heart, my passion is wanting to be out there, where the lost sheep hang out, because they're not in our churches, are they? They're not generally crossing our thresholds. I mean, some mega churches, they see hundreds, even thousands cross. But guys, there are millions out there, millions of lost souls, people we need to be getting on their radar about kingdom things, about gospel things. And so that was always been my heart. And the Lord gave a vision for 7:14 prayer back then. And then 2 years ago, in 2019, I ran with a vision I'd felt the Lord give me after the prayer vision, which was to see the whole of the Bible declared over the Houses of Parliament. So we set up something called Truth to Power. And the vision was simply from January through to December of 2019, we called for the whole of the Bible to be read publicly from Parliament Square over the Houses of Parliament. So we set up a website. There was a sign-up sheet. You could do it, take your day, and you could do the Bible in 1 year, readings for that day, and then pray a blessing over the government, over our nation, calling it back to the Lord. So we saw most of those days get filled. I gave up about June. We almost covered it completely till June, and then I got distracted by other things. But I trust that it happened. In 1 hour, we did a one-off special in the summer in July for an hour, which is called Anyone Who Wanted to Come, and about 82, 83 people came, gave them a set of readings different to each other. So we divided the whole Bible across 82 people. And in 1 hour, it actually took about 50 minutes, we all read our readings in a line, facing Parliament, doing spiritual battle on behalf of our nation, being a public witness, doing a weird prophetic thing. I mean, let's be honest, the prophets in the Old Testament are weird, aren't they? They do weird things, but God calls us to do weird things sometimes. I mean, whoever it was it Jeremiah? Was it Isaiah? Was it Ezekiel? Lying on their side for almost a year. Goodness me. Cooking their food over, well, the Lord said over your own excrement, and they bartered. Can we do it over animal excrement? He's like, okay then. But just doing weird stuff to be a prophetic sign to the nation that God is real and he calls nations to follow him. So we got the whole Bible read in an hour by 80 plus people. Then we worshipped on Parliament Square. Why I'm saying this is to show that, David, before he fought Goliath, he told Saul, your servant has fought and defeated the bear. He's fought and defeated the lion. This, uncircumcised Philistine will be no different. The Lord gives us battles before other things he calls us to. And what I've stepped out in the last year, in just running with this simple vision. I mean, it's not complex, is it? It's not rocket science, not even that hard. But when God is in something, sometimes they're the simplest things and the most beautiful things, and the things that he just uses for his glory, stepping out in an act of obedience, which is ultimately what I did when I felt him say, go to the streets, take a speaker, pick a hymn. We went with Amazing Grace because everyone knows it and loves it, and it means different things to different people, whether you're a believer or not. I just stepped out, and what I've been encouraged in ever since, and seeing, the many messages I've seen, received, read of people who've been touched, people saying things, I'm not religious, but that really touched me, as you'll see in this video. It just makes me realize, gosh, guys, the Lord has got individual, unique things for each of us to do that are made for us and that only we can do, because he has called us specifically to them. So I just want to encourage us, and I hope this video is an encouragement to us, to step out in faith, because there's no telling what the Lord can do when we step out in an act of obedience in something that we feel God calls us to do. But it will be aligned with you. It'll be aligned with your shape and what you've been called to do and what's been on your heart. This sort of stuff, what I've seen over the last year. And, this is the media stuff. Why it excites me is because it's a splash in the ocean, isn't it? Where most people think just faith and Christianity is dead and buried in this country. It's irrelevant, boring, untrue. It's just a little splash to say, hey, the church is still here, and Jesus is still alive, and God is still relevant and can be with you in the midst of this pandemic. And he is the only one who can bring us hope. And so to see a message go out in The Economist and The Times, The Telegraph, Sky News, BBC News, whatever it is, lots more publications, the Daily Mail, even Tatler, it's reaching an audience that previously or currently is going unreached. It's where the lost sheep hang out. And we just need to stay innovative and obedient to the Lord in whatever he's calling us to. But let's join together in watching this little video now, which tells the story of what's become known as the portable priest, because the Portobello priest, a journalist, renamed me the portable priest, which I was like, oh no, you've made a mistake. But actually it was a touch of genius, I think, inspired by the Lord, that she did that, because it's much more what I've been up to and what the Lord calls us to all be portable with the message of the gospel. So I hope you enjoy this video, and then we'll come back for some Q&A afterwards.
Whole choir singing from the heavens. I was just in awe, and it was just, the words were so beautiful, and they felt so poignant at the time.
But now So back in March, you'll probably remember, we were put on lockdown in the UK, and we realised we weren't going to be able to move about, we weren't going to be able to gather for understandable reasons. And I realised as a vicar, as we all did, that our people weren't going to be able to come to church. So I had the simple thought, well, if people can't go to church, maybe the church should go to the people. So that's what I decided. I simply thought, well, what if I headed into the parish, into the streets of my patch with a loudspeaker system and a microphone, and just simply played a hymn and led a prayer for the people there. And I didn't know what to expect. You know, I didn't know, am I going to get, you know, rotten eggs and tomatoes thrown at me? Am I going to get told to get lost? But after we played the song, amazingly, there was a real, just wonderful sense and a wonderful, just lightness in the atmosphere. So people had come to their windows in the high-rise towers behind and in the cottages in front. People had stopped on the road if they were jogging or whatever, and people really seemed to enjoy it. And there was a ripple of applause that went round. I was amazed by the response, and in that moment I sort of realised, you know what, I think this could really help people. It could really encourage people. It could be a blessing at this time when people are cut off from community, cut off from loved ones, where they're not able to see each other, and where hope really is challenged, and we do need to lift our spirits.
It was particularly that version of the song. I'd never heard that version before, and there was something just quite hauntingly beautiful about it. Like, I think music can be a very moving thing, even if you're not religious. I think quite often hymns can be a very moving thing to listen to, and that particular version of that particular song did just seem to kind of speak to the moment in time that we were all in, this time of kind of great uncertainty, and lots of people were feeling very worried and very anxious, and there was something just that I found quite it brought peace. I think it brought peace, and I really appreciated that at the time.
Yeah, it was just one of the most beautiful sounds I've heard in a long time, and it really did affect me in a very strange way. I'm not religious or anything, but I just felt like a sort of a hope, a promise. Yeah, and I think I even cried. It was just it was really an emotional thing for me. I feel very thankful for just for someone sort of awakening those feelings in me, which I would say was faith, hope, promise, and love. I'm not a religious person, I don't have any beliefs or anything, but it did make me feel something like faith.
I actually heard a prayer. I think it was, I'm not religious either, so it's the Lord's Prayer, and then it was thanking the NHS, and I had tears and I welled up. I had been in hospital all day, so it was really, really poignant, like really beautiful.
And every time I hear that tune, it just gives me goosebumps. And Pat seems to be a really powerful communicator, and I think he just picked up on a mood and a need for that message, really, that kind of message of hope. And even if you're not religious, I think we can all kind of share in that message of a need for a message of hope.
'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved.
It's been very humbling to see how God has used this to reach and touch a lot of people. The more I went out, the more I'd hear from people on Instagram, you know, contacting the Portable Priest saying, you know, I've just seen your clip and it's really moved me. I'm not religious, but, you know, it's touched me. I'm crying. I've got goosebumps. You know, this is beautiful. And it just amazed me how, obviously I'm a Christian, I believe there's a God. It amazed me how God was moving in and through it and using it to just bless and meet with people. And most people who don't even know him, but just sensing, I would say, sensing God's presence on this and being moved by that, and just touched by the peace and the sense of hope and love.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. of Charing Cross Hospital.
I heard from one nurse who was in Charing Cross Hospital at that moment who said, you know, thank you so much for coming. As you began to play, I was with a patient who went on to lose her fight with coronavirus. You'll never know the peace that song brought me and her in that moment. Thank you so much. And she said she was bawling her eyes out, crying. You know, that touches me. And one woman who got in touch on Facebook to say that her uncle was in Charing Cross Hospital as I played Amazing Grace. And what she said is her uncle died the next morning alone, on his own, in Charing Cross Hospital. And she wrote, to think that this song was the last thing that he heard on this planet brings tears to my eyes and warmth to my heart. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And it's those kinds of responses, you know, those testimony stories, if you like, that has fueled me and just meant that I've gone out, you know, 62 times now to go and try and take it to others, knowing that it will be a blessing, you know, because I've experienced and heard from others whom it has blessed.
So the COVID situation came at an interesting time, and I deal with mental health issues, specifically manic depression, and then I'm also in addiction recovery. I was in a really dark place. I was very much struggling with suicidal ideation and this heavy depression that I really could not push past or get through. And I found myself trying to pray and just really questioning, you know, God, where are you? Where are you in all of this? Where are you in my pain? Where are you in everyone else's pain? Where are you in the sick and the dying? Where are you in the people that are just holding on by a thread? Because I think I was hitting that wall that a lot of people with mental health, when you're in that place you get to, where you're standing on this ledge and you're considering the jump. And so I kept having these thoughts, and then I was trying to distract myself. So I picked up my phone and I started looking through YouTube videos. And so I think through one of the creators that I was looking at, he had a little blurb on this guy called the Portable Priest. And I thought the name was kind of funny. And I clicked on the link to just kind of see what this whole portable priest thing was about, and watched a video of Pat Allerton driving his little bicycle and setting up a sound system and playing Amazing Grace. And I had a very, very emotional reaction to that. I grew up being a choir girl, and hymns are very sacred to me. That song, Amazing Grace in particular, was my favorite song to sing to my grandmother, who was my favorite person. And my grandmother passed away several years ago, and that was the song that I sang at her memorial. And I felt like hearing that song was like God telling me to stay. And then that comfort that it always brought me because of my connection with my grandmother. And I sat with that song just for that 24 hours. And, the gift of the internet is that this priest in London can ride the streets of London and set up a sound system and play this song and pray a blessing over those streets. And that's not just reaching that little section of London. That's coming and bouncing through the internet across the pond to this woman in California who's desperately trying to find a reason to keep breathing. And that's the power of connection. And what Pat is doing for his surrounding communities has been amazing. And it's, I have found that since that moment, whereas I still am struggling with depression and with anxiety, that particular moment and that encounter and experience and that connection has really put sort of a reset button in my heart. And it's allowed me to just kind of hold with both hands hope and that things might still be hard and things might still be difficult, but God hasn't forgotten about me, and he hasn't forgotten about my story. And there's not a period at the end of the sentence yet. It's still ongoing and it's still unfolding. And there is amazing grace in that. And there are things to hope for and look forward to. So that's kind of how the Portable Priest and the story of Amazing Grace found its way to California, and specifically to me, and what it has done and how it has affected me.
How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed.
Well, I think the song Amazing Grace is such a beautiful song anyway, but the version we found just randomly on Spotify by Judy Collins, who's a rocker, I think from the 60s, from my mum's era, the way she sings the hymn that we've been playing is just the most beautiful version I've ever heard. It's hauntingly beautiful. And I think the words themselves speak of God's love to us. I mean, his amazing grace. And grace just means gift, God's gift to us of sending his son for us because he loves us and wants to bring us home. And the whole hymn, all the lyrics carry that sense of God's love, his welcome to all human beings to come to him, no matter our background, no matter what we've done, no matter whether we feel worthy or not, we can come freely. And that's the spirit that this hymn, I think, carries, and it unlocks people, and they recognize it, and they maybe sang it at school, or they heard it at, you know, a loved one's funeral, or whatever it is. It touches them, it connects with them, and then having a moment of stillness where they can be quiet and just have a moment's peace, but knowing perhaps if there is a God, he's watching, he's listening, and he's there with them then. Other communities have run with this vision. You know, so I've heard of it happening in Norfolk. Some friends in Cirencester did it. I've heard of it taking place in Bristol and down in Cornwall. This is really, you know, capturing something of the imagination at this time. And people, you know, I'd love to see other people just doing the same thing, because I think the power is in the music and is in the lyrics of Amazing Grace and God's presence through that prayer. I think it has a special power in that moment to bring us together and to just unite our hearts in a shared moment, a shared experience. And I think that's what I've seen. I've gone out 62 times now and done it all over different places of London. And it's been the same response every single time. And that's amazing to me, you know, that we're all affected in similar ways and we're all looking for the same stuff. We are looking for connection, for relationship, for hope, and for meaning. And I think a moment like this helps just bring a sense of meaning and stability in the storm.
Well, guys, listen, not much that I want to say more. I hope you enjoyed that video, lovingly and beautifully made by my friend, Mark Digay. Other than to say, the lovely person you saw at the beginning of the video called Shweya, who had been shielding because of treatment for cancer. Tragically, the back end of last year, very near Christmas, she lost her fight with cancer and she passed away. But the very moving thing is that for me personally, is that her friends and Donna, who also featured in the video, reached out to me to ask if I would take a part in her funeral. So they invited me to Kensal Crematorium And outside, on the route that the hearse takes to get to the building, the crematorium itself, there's a big area in the graveyard, a sort of lay-by with a drive where people could spread out and be gathered. And they asked if I would come and set up my speaker system and play Amazing Grace as Shweya in her coffin in the hearse passed by for her and to her funeral. So the hearse stopped and we played Amazing Grace. I shared a quick thought on hope that Jesus is alive and God offers each one of us grace. We said the Lord's Prayer, and that was that. But guys, this is why we do what we do. This is why we reach out, and we are constantly seeking to be innovative and engage in all these different public spaces and on social media and all these different platforms, because that's where the lost sheep hang out. That's where people who don't yet know Jesus are. They're not in our churches, but they are online. So we've got to do whatever we can to make a splash, to make a noise for Jesus Christ, not coming up with our own ideas, but praying to the Lord for his ideas. And when we hear from him, stepping out in obedience, because when we step out in obedience, there's no telling what God might do with that. Amen. Amen. Well, the video is available online on YouTube. If you just Google the Portable Priest or Pat Allerton, it should come up there, but it's called the Portable Priest on online on YouTube. So why don't we pray together as we close? And Lord, we just ask for your grace, for your help, your inspiration as your people, as your church, to know where to go, how to go, when to go, to reach out to lost sheep, sons and daughters who are prodigal at this moment, Lord, and who aren't in our churches, who aren't attending our events, but whom we know you have great love for and came to redeem and bring home. So inspire us, Lord. Pour out your Spirit on us, your church, at this time, and give us fresh creativity from heaven to know how to step out more boldly and more effectively in mission for your sake and in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, God bless you guys. It's been a joy to be with you.